Very good. So Allison, with that stage kind of set then, you're talking about value, we're talking about same problems, different context. What then are you seeing as the tools that one might need for the new normal?
Sure. Whatever it is, I'll say that I don't think it's enough. However, we're using that at this point, and that is, whether that's how you use your coaches, whether that's that you have a great brand book, whether that's that you have a cool mascot or a fight song, or you guys are really good at Instagram or whatever it is. I think that we're in a position where we're trying to have action items that are very short term, and we're not doing enough thinking big picture, big vision. So when I talk about, what are we going to look like on the other side of this, deciding that is really predicated on the action that we're taking right now. So when we say, who are you? Identifying what your identity is. And when I say what your identity is, right, in branding, marketing, sales, for any of you, and most of you have probably recruited, right? Who are you and why should we care? And I think a lot of that isn't just about, well, we do X really well. We think that Y is important. You should come to W University because you can graduate in 3.5 years with this degree and you can't do that anywhere else. All of that is great and it works for us. It's not going to be enough. I think that we've seen this shift in the private sector, especially around generations of consumers and young people who want to be really connected. And so it's not as much about the brand name as it is what their mission is or what they stand for, or whether they donate shoes or whether they do service hours. And people suddenly want to be a lot more connected with the mission and the identity of corporations they support, places that they donate money to, whatever that looks like. I think having a really distinctive and really complete narrative is going to be a really big part of who comes out in a space where you are identifiable. So if we're all competing in September for those same 20 athletes, deciding who you are now is going to matter, because they're not going to connect with you in September. They're not going to connect with you in October. They're going to connect with you over the next 4 weeks. And what we're going to see coming out of COVID-19, whenever we do, I think, is everyone is going to ask, they're not just going to ask us, right? They're going to ask Amazon, and they're going to ask Procter & Gamble, and they're going to ask Marriott or whoever it is, right? What did you do during the crisis? How did you treat your employees? How did you treat your customers? How did you communicate through whatever that is? And I think that that applies just as much to us right now, not in growing an identity around crisis management, but in finding opportunities to really talk very authentically about who we are and why it matters. And the second part of that is, how do we know, right? And so when you talk about what are the tools, really specifically branding and marketing, is it your brand book? Do you have distinctive markers? Do you have good logos, consistent colors? Do you have a catchphrase or a hashtag, or what's the language that you use to talk about who you are and how you are for audiences? How do you use your coaches? How do you use your staff members? Do you have a vocabulary around, here's how we talk about ourselves, here's some words we don't say because this just isn't what we do. And I don't mean that in a, here's the front that we put on, but I think in the way that, for most people who have recruited, knowing what you are and what you aren't is really important, and being able to communicate that and connect in authentic ways right now matters more than anything. I tell our coaches sometimes, we've talked a lot since I've gotten to St. Xavier around kind of our brand and how we're moving that forward and creating value in those spaces. And a lot of that, I think, comes from understanding the importance of consistency. So, do you, as an athletic department, as the value of the Tigers or the Hawks or whatever you are, do you show up in the same place all the time? Does it look the same? Does it sound the same? Does it feel the same? And how do we know? So, it sounds dumb, and I know that it drives our coaches nuts, but the idea that everybody goes off and they make their rogue t-shirts and, they design whatever logo they want, and then they stretch the mascot, and it's kind of a pink because we're doing this thing and all of this stuff, and it sounds really anal retentive, and it sounds over the top, but that idea, especially early on, of creating a foundation around every time you see us, this is how we look, and you know that it's us. And it's not just about knowing, oh, that's the St. Xavier red, or oh, that's the football team's jersey. But branding and creating the value around who you are is about what I think and what I feel when I see it.
And
Allison, go ahead.
If
Yeah,
I
please.
Interject here real quick, not to get too technical detailing, but I think that it's important to also point out the distinction between what is a brand and what is a brand identity. And without getting too much into the weeds, what you're talking about in terms of who are you and why does it matter, that's, to me, I would identify that as the brand part of this. What is a brand? It's your story, it's your values, it's your mission, it's what makes you different in a substantive way, and how you communicate with people and what you communicate to those people. The brand identity, then, those logos, those colors, those are those assets that you use that are the point of the spear, if you will, the beginning of the conversation, to a recruit, to a sponsor, to a donor, to communicate what those values are. So you've got what are your values, what's your mission, and then what are the tools that you use to represent those things. The terms get conflated a lot.
For sure, for sure.
Your brand, when you say we have a new brand, what they mean is we have a new set of logos. But that brand is the who are you part. And what you're talking about here is in making that differentiation to those audiences in this time of crisis, coming out on the other end, that who are you and what do you stand for becomes that much more important. Is that an accurate way of putting that?
Absolutely. So I see it as identity and assets, right? And so the most important thing about the assets, and like you say, whether it's your logo, whether it's your font, whether it's your hashtag, whether it's your newsletter, whatever that is, those assets, and frankly, I throw staff in there a lot. I think coaches are great assets in a lot of those spaces. The identity is, and especially at a time like this, what we're talking about is the narrative. And the narrative and the identity around who you are and what the values are. And sometimes you need a wrench and sometimes you need a hammer. But it's about building the consistency around the narrative of whatever you decide that you are and whatever you decide that that is, why does it have value? Why does it matter? Not at this moment, but in general. Who are those audiences and why does it matter? And then how are the specific and consistent ways that you're going to talk about that? And so, yes, sometimes it's your logo. Yes, sometimes it's your colors. Yes, sometimes it's your hashtag. Yes, sometimes it's just the vocabulary that you use. Yes, sometimes it's that when we talk to alums, we know that a big part of our identity at St. Xavier Athletics, and I'll talk about it in a minute, we actually just did a full philanthropic launch in March, which obviously is not ideal, but is a lot around not just a tradition of success for us, but a tradition of relationships. And so the ways that we approach, whether it's, how we write an email, how I write a thank you letter, how I talk to a group of people, is from a lens of the value of relationships and those continuing for us. And so it's different for everybody depending on, what you want it to be, but deciding what that identity and that value is really around building a narrative. And now more than ever, it's important for us all to be storytellers. And that story, you don't read 3 pages of The Velveteen Rabbit and then all of a sudden Sleeping Beauty pops up on the page.
Can I take just a quick moment? You mentioned the institutional aspect of this as well previously. Can you talk just for a moment about the idea of an athletic program's mission and its connection to the institutional mission? How do those two things work together in thinking about how do you get to the other side of this moment of crisis?
Definitely. I mean, I think, right, for all of us, especially in small college athletics, I think part of why we do what we do and we work where we work is because we like to be mission driven. And we're a great example. So we're sitting in this time of crisis. St. Xavier University is a Sisters of Mercy institution. So we are a Catholic college in the south side of Chicago. And the Sisters of Mercy are a very specific order that have a history. They originated out of Ireland and came over to America, and they have a history of basically serving underserved populations, primarily, in history, it's been women, minorities, the sick, the uneducated. And so very quick overview, but part of that for us is when we talk about the students that we recruit or how we build relationships or develop our athletes over 4 years in our department, it is with the understanding that we have a really specific population and demographic of students that we are recruiting to our university, which is solely mission driven. And that's a really positive thing. But it also means that, for example, in a narrative in a time of crisis, we're sitting here around a lot of other schools in Chicago, and we're talking about what is the narrative going to be in our crisis. And it's like, well, we were built for this. This is our mission has always been this. Our mission has always been serve in crisis. Our mission has always been to target underserved populations. Our mission has always been about building equity or whatever that looks like. And so it's not to say that anybody that doesn't have that mission or anybody that doesn't have that identity is now just stuck. I hope you are if you're competing with us, but you're not. But really, it's about understanding whatever that value is, right? We're doing the same thing. We're, as an athletic department, we're a microcosm of our institution, the same way that our student affairs division is, the same way that our chemistry department is, right? Like, we pick the places that we work because it's not just a job for us, right? This is the life that we choose and the people that we serve. And so I think that we are all mission aligned in understanding kind of the bigger vision institutionally for how that breaks down to our departments. And I'm of course only speaking for myself, and these are all my opinions, but I think that that's probably a pretty, in my professional career, a theme across small college athletics for sure.
Sure. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to get more great sports branding videos from Hartwell Studio Works, hit the subscribe button on the right of your screen. I'll look forward to seeing you next time.